if anyone knows of jobs going for people who love to read but are completely unqualified to do anything in the bookish world, hit me up. I am perfect for that position. Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about books. Today I am wrapping up April, which was not a great reading month for me. I only read 6 books, and that was with Dewey's 24-hour readathon in there. And you might have noticed that I didn't publish any videos last week. I didn't do my Wednesday video, and I missed my Saturday video as well. And guys, it's just because life keeps getting in the bloody way. Work is really busy. I'm on a temporary contract until the end of the summer, and right now we are kind of at, like, I want to say peak, but I have a feeling there's more to come, that we are at a really crucial point in my contract. So there's that. And then just, I don't know, I think I did hit a bit of a reading slump. I think I'm out of that now, but that obviously affected things. And I've just been busy trying to get my workouts in and trying to hit a step goal each day, which doesn't happen. But yeah, so I think my attention's been pulled in lots of different directions and I just ran out of time to make videos. But I really missed it. I love this channel. I really want to be more consistent. I got into a really good groove before Christmas where I was actually like bulk recording things and I felt really on top of my game. That has faded away, but I would like to get back into a bit of a groove with that and definitely try and make my shelf indulgence videos on a Wednesday more consistent. But it is a work in progress. I am a work in progress, so I do hope you'll bear with me because I am so close to my 200 subscribers. It has taken me so long. I cannot lose momentum now. If you know like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 friends who would enjoy my videos, please give them a shout and get them to subscribe because I would love to hit my 200, particularly seeing as we are now in May and May is my birthday month. I hit the big old 37 later on in the month, so it'd be a really nice birthday present if I could hit 200 subscribers for them. And here in Scotland, we are into our spring. The weather's hit and miss, but when it's good, it's beautiful. And we are also out of lockdown. The restrictions are easing. Things feel so much more positive at the moment. And with restrictions easing and shops opening back up, I am definitely hoping to find time to schedule in some charity shop trips so I can pick up some new books. So hopefully there will also be a book haul this month as well. But that's all still to come. What I'm doing today is looking back at those 6 books that I did manage to read in April. And I've had a little think, and normally I go by star reviews, but I have been kind of falling out of love with star reviews. Sometimes it just depends on my mood whether a book gets a 3 or a 4 star or a 4 or a 5 star. It's not my favorite way to look at a book, and I know a lot of you guys are feeling the same. So I'm still going to be talking about my books that I've read in kind of a rough order of my favorite first, but I'm not slapping a label on them because particularly a lot of the books you can't compare them to each other, because sometimes I review books on the strength of that author's other books that I've read as well. So it's really hard to compare authors, it's really hard to compare genres. There's just a whole lot of stuff that goes in that I don't think you can capture in stars. But having said that, I am going to kick off with my favourite book of the month. And this one was quite a surprise to me. I was a bit daunted going into it, but I absolutely loved The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. And I was nervous going into this for a couple of reasons. One, it's huge. It's over 600 pages. And more than that, I'm really into reading about the experiences of people who have been colonised and post-colonialism. And this book talks about that, but it's written by a white American woman. I think she's American. Maybe I've just made that assumption. And the story itself is the experience of being in Congo as told by white missionary American people. So I was concerned how that would play out, but obviously, seeing as I loved it, those fears were totally unfounded. So this is the story of, like I said, an American missionary family. They go to Congo in the beginning of the 60s, and it's at the time of the Belgian withdrawal of power and, on the surface of it at least, independence coming to Congo. And they've gone there to spread the good news to a village of completely unsuspecting, is it Congolese? Or have I just made that up? Anyway, these people are not really participants in the choice of having a missionary family foisted upon them. The family is headed by Nathan. He is like a zealot. He's totally focused on his purpose to the point of being blinkered to, slightly minor things like the needs and wants of the community that he has planked himself into. Language barriers, cultural barriers, or even getting to know his unwitting new congregation. And, from that, you can tell that his mission goes about as well as you could assume in that situation. And he kind of rules his family in much of the same way. The story is actually told through the eyes of his wife and his 4 daughters, I think there are. The wife's voice is from a time quite long after the aftermath, or like long into the aftermath of what has happened, and his daughter's voices are narrating it as it goes on, and then the years that follow their original mission. And this isn't just a story about the family, it's not just a story about the mission or the village in which they live. This book is all encompassing. It looks at Congo under Belgian rule, it looks at the struggle for independence, and it looks at what happens when 2 big countries, so America and Russia during the Cold War, use a colonized country as sort of like the pitch on which to play out their power games. And so it's kind of the intersection of the political, the cultural, and the personal, and it's told through some very, very interesting characters. Each of the women has a strong individual voice and experience and way of seeing the world. I think my particular favourite was one of the daughters, Ada. She's part of a set of twins, and she has been born with disabilities and seems to be selectively mute, but her inner monologue, her way of seeing things is really fascinating and so compelling. And then I also loved to hate the elder sister, Rachel, who is like the archetypal self-absorbed, vapid airhead. I was so amused by her. This is going to be ironic because I'm probably going to mispronounce this, her malapropisms. And although sometimes that kind of verged on a bit of a caricature, I really enjoyed that. And just seeing how she just totally doesn't understand and doesn't want to understand the context in which she's living. She is totally powered by selfishness. And yeah, she's a fun read. And all these voices combined creates this really rich book that has a lot of depth and beauty and warmth to it, even though there is so much tragedy in the story, both in terms of what happens to the family and in terms of what is happening to Congo. And so, like I said, I loved this, and my fears were completely unfounded, because although she is a white woman writing about a white family, it is their experience of living in a colonized country. And so she's not appropriating the culture or any of the practices or the religions or anything like that. But what she does do is turn a really critical eye on that colonialism and exploiting other less developed nations for, wealth and power. And she highlights the things that can be lost by simply trying to transplant a whole culture or religion from one place to another without a second thought to what the recipients want and need, and without respecting the indigenous way of life and people. And although I think it's always best to read about these things from own voices, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to hear it from other perspectives, particularly when it's a voice and writing that is so strong, as in the case with Barbara Kingsolver. I thought this was fabulous. I would definitely be looking to see if any of her other books sound like something I would want to read. But yeah, this was definitely the best book that I read in April. And then next was the Shelter Box Book Club pick for, I think this was from March. I'm so behind on that. I think I might just drop the book club bit and just have a nice surprise of getting a new book every month that has come as a thank you for the donation that I give to the charity. But this was A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum, and I really enjoyed this one as well. So although I didn't specifically pick this, it definitely is the sort of book that I would have picked up for myself, because it brings together so many flavours that my reading tastes love. Own voices, immigrant experience, women's experiences, and getting the chance to read about a culture that is different from mine. I love all those things, and this book delivers on all of them. Essentially, this is the story of the women of one family. So we have Isra, and kind of her mother is part of it as well, but it's mainly her mother-in-law, her sister-in-law, and her 4 daughters. And from the outset of the book, we know that Isra, her husband, and her sister-in-law are no longer with the family, and her in-laws are raising her daughters. It's told in a dual timeline. So we follow Isra from childhood in Palestine through to her marriage and the immigration to America that it entailed, through her becoming a mother to 4 daughters and her life with her new family. But simultaneously we follow the story of her daughters, mainly one, Dea, who is struggling with a lot of things. She is a high school student and she wants to go to college, but her in-laws are really insistent on marrying her off. She has memories of her parents, but she doesn't really understand what happened and why they aren't with the family, and so she's got a lot going on. It's a story that throws like a really stark light on how Muslim Arab women are treated, and how that's perpetuated not just by men but by other women, and you know, that bigger cycle of religion and culture and tradition. And particularly in Isra's story, how that led to tragedy for her. And in Dea's story, we are kind of unraveling the family secrets, the mystery of what has gone on, whilst also seeing her try to be her own person amongst all these pressures to conform and to be the good daughter and all those sorts of things. I thought this was a really affecting story. I think I would have enjoyed it even without the family mystery aspect, but it was those family stories and how they came out through the narrative that really captivated me and held me. And I really particularly enjoyed how Isra was given a voice in this book that she probably wouldn't have had in reality. Oh, sorry, right. A delivery guy came to the door and I've managed to knock everything over as I rushed to go and answer it. So sorry if everything looks a bit skew with. I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, I was talking about the characters. You know, and I really appreciated that even the mother-in-law, who is quite a dragon, we get a glimpse of her backstory to try and understand why she is the way that she is. And particularly with Isra, with her sister-in-law Sarah and her mother-in-law Frida, we get to see that they are nuanced characters behind the closed doors, behind the hijab, behind that kind of supposed servile attitude or status. They have their own experiences, histories, needs, wants, and you know, fears and sorrows that follow them around through their lives. And obviously that should go without saying, but I often think in the way that women like this are treated and the way they're often represented, it can almost be easy to overlook that. Even in Dea, we see that as she struggles with whether to accept her fate or rise up against it. And for me, she was the least fleshed out character, but that might be because she is still so young and she lives a life where decisions are very much made for her rather than with her. This is just a really good book. Like, it's a debut, and I think Etaf Rum is still very much finding her voice, but there are some gorgeous turns of phrase in this book, and it manages to be gentle while still dealing with some really rough topics. So I'm excited to see what she will do next. And then we had a reread for me. This was one of my books that I've picked for my project Everlasting Love, because I'm a chronic non-rereader. Wow, that really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Yeah, but I don't really reread books, purely because I've got so many that I haven't read and there's always new exciting shiny things. And I kind of often feel like if I've read a book, I'm kind of done with it. But this year, I kind of challenged myself to pick up some books that I have rated 5 stars that I read years ago, to reread them and see if I still think they are as good as they were then. This is my fourth, or is it my third? But so far, the ones that I've read have held up, and they were 5 stars when I first read them, and they've been 5 stars again. This book, it's Louise Welsh's The Cutting Room. I first read this when it first came out in the early 2000s, so nearly 2 decades ago. And I've always remembered it really fondly. It started off not just my love of Louise Welsh's writing, but also just my whole journey of my adult reading life. So I owe a lot to this book. And like I said, when I first read it, I gave it 5 stars. My tastes have evolved since then, but even still, yes, it has dropped in star rating, but only to a 4 star. I still think it really held up. So this is the story of Rilk. I assume that's how you pronounce it. Never come across that name before. He is an auctioneer in his 40s, and when he's not selling lots, he likes to drink heavily and have casual sex with strange men, well, strangers, not strange men, and generally lives in the shadier parts of life. It's set in Glasgow, and it follows Rilk on a very amateur detective journey after he discovers some really authentic looking snuff pornography pictures in an attic while he's doing a house clearing. The former owner of the photos is now deceased, very wealthy, but the only real clues as to what he was really like are in this locked attic where Rilk finds the photos. And he becomes slightly obsessed with these photos and the fate of the women in it, and it leads him to overturn some very slimy rocks in the underbelly of the city, and what he uncovers under those rocks are really not that pleased to have been disturbed. And I think what I loved about this book when I first read it is what I still love about it on rereading. Obviously, I've said before, Glasgow is my city, and I love seeing it on the page. And this book, with the dialogue and turns of phrase and the locations that are mentioned, is very much a presence in this book. There's a real sense of place. I also really love the fact that this featured a gay man as a protagonist, and there are also transgender women in this book. But the book isn't about the fact that he's gay or they're transgender. It's just taken as a given. And particularly for the time it was written, or at least for my younger self, that was very different. It was unlike anything that I had read before. I was a little bit concerned going into this how that would hold up over time, considering that Welsh is a cis woman, although she is, I think, gay herself. I know she had a partner who was another writer called Zoe Strachan for a long time. I don't know if they're still together or whatever, but she's obviously not a trans woman or a gay man, so I was a little bit concerned about that, but I do think it holds up because it feels authentic. It's not token or gimmicky. And then, of course, I really enjoy the mystery of the photos as well. Particularly what I enjoy is that the mystery doesn't dominate the story. Rilk is quite clumsy in his digging around, so that feels really realistic. He doesn't just turn into a super sleuth overnight because he's decided to find out what these photos are all about. So I guess why I've dropped the star, partly, like, this was her debut book, and it does feel like a debut. At times it can be a little bit earnest, almost like she was trying really hard, and no shade about that. It's not a criticism, because it obviously did her well. She's gone on to have a great career, and part of me quite enjoyed seeing that, because I've read books that she's written further on in her career, and it's exciting to see her trajectory. So maybe that isn't why I dropped the star rating. I think maybe for me it is just because my tastes have changed. I don't read a lot of mystery books, so that's probably all it is. But I would be really interested to see what she would do with Rilk's character and another sort of story like this, now that she is a much more seasoned writer. And I guess I'll find out, because I'm reading another one of her books later on in the year, The Bullet Trick, which I think actually might still be one of her earlier books. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So another good reread experience. I think my mind is being turned and to see why people do love to reread. But I'll save that for when I've finished all my books. for the project, and I'll do like a reflection on it at the end of the year. My next book is one that's probably going to be familiar with a lot of you, as is its author, because it is written by fellow booktuber Charles, or Charlie, Heathcote. This is our Doris, which is the first of 3, or is it 4, Our Doris books that Charlie has written, but it's the first one that I have read. And so first I'll say this isn't my usual read. Apart from maybe like memoirs by comedians and like essay collections, I don't think I've ever read a humour book before. And also, I'll just say this because I'm probably going to be cringing the whole time I'm reviewing this book, because I don't really like reading books by people I know. And I know I don't know Charlie, but I watch his videos, he's commented on a few of mine, and so there is that connection there. And like, I've known quite a few people in my life who have written books. When I worked at Waterstones, there were quite a few authors that worked there, and then in my like non-work life, I can think of a couple of other people I know that have written books. Thankfully not really close friends, so I've never really felt obliged to read the book. But what's always put me off is that feeling of like, what if I don't like it? What am I going to say? And I will never pick those books up. And when I first started watching Charlie, I kind of had that same reaction as well. I loved hearing him talk about the writing process and reading from the books, but I was kind of like, no, I can't go there. But I know a few of you guys have read his books and you say really nice things about them. And then when one of the around the year reading challenge prompts this year was to read a book by a social media personality, it kind of felt like I was being pushed in that direction. So I broke that lifelong boundary, and in this instance, at least, I am glad that I did. So this is a collection of monologues told by browbeaten and beleaguered husband Harold of the situations, the quite excruciating situations that his wife Doris gets him and herself into. And combined, they create a novel about her attempts and schemes to ensure that their house and their status within the village is the prime fixture of the Women's Institute garden safari, so where people display their gardens. And I just thought it was a really sharply observed? Yes, talk properly, Sarah. A really sharply observed and obviously very funny look at a woman and a community that's full of people who like to think of themselves as upwardly mobile. The circumstances that Doris finds herself in, and often with no one to blame but herself, though she would never see it that way, veer from the ridiculous to the like clench inducing, embarrassing horribleness that made me feel embarrassed to read them. But Charlie always steers them just the right side of them becoming completely farcical. And I think seeing them through the eyes of Harold is a masterstroke, and his voice is so authentic. You can literally picture him telling you these stories over a pint in the pub, complete with like eye rolls and sighs and that kind of resigned acceptance of a long married, long suffering husband. And I think for me, Harold acts as a buffer, because I think on her own, Doris would be the sort of character that I wouldn't want to read about, that I would actually just want to slap. But there is like a warmth and love in Harold's tone, even when he is disparaging about her, that made me think, you know, like there's obviously something in Doris, like a deeper vulnerability or heart that makes her not all that bad. So yeah, my fears were unfounded with this. I didn't feel awkward reading this. I don't really feel awkward reviewing it because it is a really good, funny, thoroughly British book. So I would definitely recommend it. I would definitely recommend his channel. So if you haven't checked him out, it's just Charles Heathcote here on BookTube. I will link it in the description box below, because what kind of reassured me about going into this book is that he has that really dry northern wit when he's talking in his videos, and I was really hoping it would translate onto the page, and it absolutely does. So if you enjoy his videos, you will definitely enjoy his book. And then we move on to the only NetGalley that I managed to read in April, which was Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. It came out this week on the 4th of May. And I was going to call this a novel, but really it's a series of vignettes as we kind of ride in the inner monologue of a 40-something woman as she walks through her city. And the city isn't named, but I don't know if there's a description or something that I knew it was set in Italy and I just assumed it was Rome. So this is probably another book where there is that sense of place as well. And Lahiri wrote this book in Italian. I gather she's moved from America over to Italy. And what she's translated this herself, which I was really interested about. I love translated fiction, but I often worry that in the translation process, are we really getting the words that the author intended? And I don't think I've ever read a translated book that has been translated by the author, so that was really exciting. The consistent theme through this book is solitude versus loneliness. Because our narrator lives alone, she's never been married, she's never had children, she doesn't have any siblings. Her last relationship, I think, was quite a while ago and it wasn't a great breakup. And her relationship with her parents is, well, her father passed away when she was a teenager, so that doesn't exist. And then her mother doesn't live close to her either. So although she does have a career and she has friends, her life is mainly lived solo. At times this makes her feel free, but more often than not there is a real melancholy in her thoughts and mood. She ruminates on her childhood, her place in the world, and what those around her who are married have that she doesn't. She's a complex character. I found her really interesting, although I didn't always necessarily like her. But she's definitely someone I could have spent more time with because she has the benefit of her inner monologue being Lahiri's prose, which is really rich and insightful, and so was really great to read. So this is my third Lahiri book, and I think it doesn't reach the perfection of The Interpreter of Maladies, but I think I liked it slightly more than The Namesake. But it is really hard to compare them because they're very different books, very different styles, because obviously The Interpreter of Maladies is short stories, The Namesake is more like a traditional novel, and then this is more like vignettes. So that's more like just a gut reaction, but overall I felt this book really drew me in, kept me interested, and it really does capture that mood. Being as I am a woman in my nearly late 30s who is alone and will probably stay that way for at least the foreseeable future. Yes, I have my kids, so I'm slightly different, but it's a voice and a topic that I found really interesting to read about. And then my final book was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Now I have a copy of this on my Kindle, so I was planning on reading it like that, but because it was one of the books that I read during Dewey's 24-hour readathon, which I have a vlog about, which I will link down below, you can go and check that out, and I wanted to have an audio book so I could go out on walks and things and not miss out on reading time. I ended up listening to it as an audiobook. I probably will go back because it's not very long. I probably will go back and read the Kindle version at some point, and I wonder if like my different experience, well, the different format, whether that will change my experience of the book. I don't know. But I've been interested in picking up one of her books for a while, and this seemed like a good place to start. I'm aware of the Netflix version of this book. I haven't watched, I think I watched like the first episode, but I haven't like carried on with it. I will. But I know that is less of an adaptation and more of an interpretation because it does change a lot from the book. But I had totally forgotten this, and I only realised it when I was reading that I've seen the 1999 film The Haunting, which from what I can remember is a bit more faithful to the book. So I don't read a lot of horror. And it's been a while since I've read a book that's really classed as a horror. I've read, I love gothic books, but I haven't read one that people would really say is a horror. So I was a little bit nervous going into this. I was a bit worried that it might freak me out, but I was also kind of excited to see whether it would or not. So this is this is the haunted house story. Surely this is the haunted house story. And it's about a group of strangers who were all invited by this Dr. Montague. He's some sort of academic or scholar with an interest in the occult. And he invites these four strangers, is it? No, it's two women and a man. He invites them to stay with him in this notorious hill house, which is supposedly like haunted or cursed or just has general bad vibes, and which I find really funny because here where I live, one of our big attractions is the Hill House, which is a gorgeous building that was designed by beloved Scottish architect Charles Rennie Mackintosh, and that's like a totally different vibe if that was haunted. But anyway, they're invited to stay in this house with Dr. Montague, and mainly we kind of follow Eleanor, who is the youngest of the visitors, and she is using this experience to kind of draw a line under her life of being a carer for her ill mother. I think the mother has passed away, and kind of escaped the clutches of her sister as well, by the sounds of it. And as the group get to know each other, the house starts to live up to its reputation. And there's a series of creepy events that happen leading up to quite a dramatic climax. I really enjoyed the plot, the characters, and the writing of this book. It's got a really good pace. It unfolds in a compelling way. I really enjoyed seeing the relationships develop as the people got to know each other, and I really liked Jackson's writing style. She's got a little bit of observational wit in there and insight, and it just elevates the story from being like a bump in the night sort of thing. But what I was surprised, given how revered this book is that I was not scared in the slightest. Unnerved, possibly, before the haunting really started. There's a really good sense of atmosphere building up. But once the haunting, like once the house kind of kicked into gear, it just wasn't extreme enough to spook me. And that didn't put me off the book, actually, but I do think it's a reflection of our modern times. Like, I love the gothicness of this book, but it wasn't frightening. And I think we live in a time where horror in particular is all about shock and jump scares and gore and body horror, and it just felt a little tame compared to other things that I've seen or read. Because, you know, like the tension does build, and there is a psychological element which I find the most scary thing. But I just think what we're compared to, it just didn't pack that much punch. It just wasn't extreme enough, but I still thought it was a fabulous book, and I definitely still want to read is it We've Always Lived in the Castle? That's the one that I'm really interested to read of Shirley Jackson, so that's definitely not coming off my TBR. And so yeah, that's it, just a wee pile in April, which makes filming a wrap-up much easier. But yeah, I would like to pick up the pace. I had set myself the goal of reading 100 books this year, and I'm still ahead of target with that, but I'm behind in the books I'd actually wanted to read. Yes, I picked up a bit, but I can't see May making a massive dent in that, so there might be some books that are on my annual plan that I need to drop and maybe leave till next year. But I think it's a bit early in the year to be worrying about things like that, especially since I might be unemployed come September and I'll have all the time in the world to read. If anyone knows of jobs going for people who love to read but are completely unqualified to do anything in the bookish world, hit me up. I am perfect for that position. So have you read any of those books? Have I enticed you to read any of them? As always, I would love to know, so drop me a comment below, and remember to tell those friends to subscribe so I can get to my 200. I would really, really appreciate it. But my mouth is now as dry as a lost flip-flop in the desert, so I really need to wrap this up now. Go and get something to drink. Plus, it's voting day as I film this. It's voting day, election day here in Scotland, and I need to go and cast my vote because democracy is important. And then I'm going to come home, sit on my bum and watch Line of Duty, which sounds wonderful. So until next time, bye. It can almost